Where's the clicker? She's just, when I say things, she's just going to do it. It's very complicated. Yes, it should, was wrong. Oh, no, no, yeah. Hey, are you plugged in? Hey, she's plugged in. We are going to be, just wanting to do it better than.
The far table?
Yes, the far table. I have a cover. Perfect. You can see there's a nice cover page, so it hasn't been shown yet. It was there and then it went away.
There it is.
Oh, there it is.
Am I okay to go to it there?
Yes, I think that's no problem. I'm standing, so these chairs. I next time I would get that, but I didn't want to like hold it. The Hitties ones are actually. Should have got three longer period. I just have to.
It's a yesterday. Very nice to come back to Saxon. Okay, thanks for your patience. We can proceed with the Gledhill matter. That's case heading 2513. And we've got Ms. Paulus, Ms. Whiteway, and Mr. Graves for the state. And then we have Mr. Diaz here for the defendant, who's also present. We are set for the detention hearing today. And happy to hear from the state first.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Usually I don't get to stand here, but for this hearing I do. Your Honor, the state requests that you continue to hold the defendant, Jennifer Gledhill, without bail. In this case, there is substantial evidence. There's substantial evidence that supports that Matthew Johnson is not missing. Matthew Johnson was murdered by the defendant. I want to briefly go over the evidence in this case. As I've previously told the court, this is an active investigation, and there is significant, substantial evidence discovered after the charging document was filed, and I will include information regarding the new evidence in the state's argument.
Unlock the darkest stories and unravel the mysteries with Dark Crime Box. Subscribe now and step inside the world of true crime like never before.
And what Jennifer Gledhill said next would seal her fate forever.
On September 28th, Jennifer Gledhill called police to report her husband, Matthew Johnson, missing.
The disappearance of Matthew Johnson, a Utah father and husband, and the arrest of his wealthy wife, Jennifer Gledhill, for first-degree murder.
Jen in our home before and, breaking bread with them. And then it turned out that she's responsible for his death. It was shocking.
The house did not fall apart all at once. It tightened. Before we continue this story, PLs don't forget to like and subscribe, and I also love good comment. At first, it was only silence stretching longer than it should. Rooms once filled with routine became quiet zones where footsteps were measured and words were chosen carefully. Jennifer Gledhill learned to move through her own home as if it were already watching her, as if the walls were recording the smallest shifts in mood. Outwardly, nothing appeared broken. Schedules still existed. Responsibilities were still performed. From the outside, it looked functional. But inside, pressure was building in places no one else could see. Control replaced affection. Resentment took the place of conversation. What was once partnership slowly turned into surveillance. Financial strain became more than numbers on paper. It became a constant presence, hovering over every decision. Bills arrived with regularity, but relief never did. Each expense felt personal. Each compromise felt like surrender. Jennifer began to interpret stability as confinement, responsibility as theft, family as something that demanded more than it gave. The warning signs were not loud. They never are. They appeared in shifts of behavior that could be explained away. Withdrawal disguised as fatigue, irritation justified as stress, an increasing need for privacy masked as independence. Those around her noticed changes but labeled them temporary, manageable, normal. Inside her mind, a narrative began to form. It did not arrive suddenly. It assembled itself piece by piece. A belief that she was trapped. A belief that she was unappreciated. A belief that the life she was living had been imposed on her, not chosen. Each thought reinforced the next, creating a closed system where doubt no longer entered. Secrecy became a tool. Hidden communications offered validation without accountability. Emotional escape felt safer than honesty. The more concealed the connection, the more powerful it became. What began as relief slowly transformed into justification. Boundaries dissolved quietly, replaced by rationalizations that made betrayal feel necessary. At home, emotional distance widened. Moments that once carried warmth became transactional. Shared spaces felt crowded. Time together felt obligatory. Jennifer started to view her family not as people, but as obstacles between her and a version of life she believed she deserved. Sleep changed. Nights stretched longer. Thoughts repeated themselves without resolution. The same questions circled endlessly, each time ending with the same conclusion: that nothing could improve unless something ended. That solutions no longer existed within the structure she was living inside. The house absorbed everything. The tension, the unspoken anger, the planning that did not yet look like planning. Objects became symbols. Doors represented separation. Hallways became pathways of avoidance. Even familiar sounds took on new meanings, interpreted through suspicion and irritation. What others failed to recognize was not cruelty, but detachment. Jennifer's emotional center began to shut down selectively. Empathy dulled. Concern narrowed. The future stopped, including everyone. It shrank until it could fit inside a single point of focus. At some point, secrecy stopped being thrilling and started feeling urgent. Time felt hostile. Each passing day reinforced the sense that something had to change immediately. The internal narrative hardened. Compromise disappeared from the mental landscape entirely. The thought that once felt unthinkable crossed the line into possibility, then into consideration, then into inevitability. By the time the decision fully formed, it did not feel violent to her. It felt logical, necessary, clean in its simplicity. The chaos she felt inside could be erased with a single irreversible act. The family she once built became something she believed. She needed to escape, not protect. The night it happened did not announce itself. There was no dramatic shift in the air, no warning signal, just the continuation of routine, carrying her toward a moment that had already been rehearsed in her mind. And once that boundary was crossed, there was no version of Jennifer Gledhill that could return to what existed before, because the crime did not begin in that house. It began long before, in the quiet permission she gave herself to believe that destruction could feel like freedom. The aftermath did not arrive with chaos. It arrived with stillness. The house stood unchanged, but everything inside it had been emptied of meaning. Familiar objects no longer belonged to anyone. Time stalled, then lurched forward without asking permission. What had been done could not be undone, and the weight of that realization settled slowly, pressing down in layers. Jennifer moved through the hours that followed as if observing herself from a distance. Actions were performed mechanically. Decisions felt automatic. The mind protected itself by narrowing focus, refusing to process the full scale of what had occurred. Shock did not scream. It numbed. When authorities entered the scene, the space transformed instantly. The home became evidence. Every surface was questioned. Every detail reinterpreted. The life once lived there was reduced to timelines, measurements, and conclusions. The narrative Jennifer had built for herself began to fracture under scrutiny. The secrecy that once felt empowering now worked against her. Digital trails resurfaced. Hidden connections were uncovered. Messages that once felt private became permanent. Each discovery tightened the case around her, stripping away explanations until only intent remained. Arrest was not dramatic. There was no moment of cinematic collapse, just the quiet removal of freedom. Hands restrained, doors closing, the outside world receding faster than expected. The audio transition from autonomy to custody happened in minutes, but the shock would echo for years. The holding cell introduced a new reality. Cold surfaces, recycled air, sounds that never stopped completely. Jennifer's identity shifted again, this time officially. She was no longer a spouse, no longer a parent, no longer in control of her narrative. She was an accused killer awaiting judgment. Other detainees noticed immediately. Crimes are currency in confined spaces. The nature of hers placed her in a category few are willing to defend. Family violence carries a weight that does not diminish with explanation. It follows. It stains. Court proceedings stretched time into fragments. Days filled with waiting. Nights filled with replay. Evidence replaced emotion. Her internal justifications collapsed one by one under the blunt force of consequence. What once felt logical now appeared fragile, hollow, indefensible. Sentencing closed the final door. Not symbolically, physically. The sound of it locking behind her marked the true beginning of punishment. Prison was not a continuation of life. It was a separate existence governed by rules that offered no comfort. Inside, Jennifer learned quickly that protection is temporary and conditional. Some guards kept distance. Others enforced order with rigid neutrality. Her crime placed her under constant observation, not for safety alone, but because of what she represented. Inmate reactions ranged from hostility to calculated indifference. Some women refused to share space with her. Others saw her as an easy target. She learned to speak less, move carefully, and avoid attention. Silence became armor. Days followed strict patterns, counts, meals, limited movement. Privacy disappeared entirely. The absence of choice eroded patience. The mind searched for escape but found only repetition. Sleep brought no relief. Dreams replayed fragments out of order. Waking hours were filled with memories she could not outrun. The mind turned inward, revisiting moments she once dismissed. Regret arrived not as redemption, but as an unending presence. Letters stopped coming. Support thinned. The outside world moved on without her. Birthdays passed unnoticed. Seasons changed without meaning. Jennifer existed inside a paused timeline while everything else continued forward. Prison does not rush transformation. It grinds it down slowly. The confidence that once fueled her decisions eroded. The certainty that once justified destruction dissolved into confusion and emptiness. She began to understand the true cost of what she had done, not in dramatic realization, but through accumulation. Lost relationships, permanent separation, a future stripped of possibility. The affair that once promised escape now existed only as evidence and memory. It offered no comfort, no validation, only a reminder of how easily desire can mutate into catastrophe. And as the years stretched ahead, Jennifer faced the reality prison never explains, aloud, that some choices don't just end lives. They erase the person who made them, leaving behind someone who must live with the silence they created. Time inside prison does not pass. It accumulates. Days stack on top of each other until they blur into a single, unbroken stretch of confinement. Jennifer Gledhill learns that punishment is not delivered all at once. It is rationed carefully, stretched across years so it never fully loses its edge. Every morning begins the same way, and that sameness becomes its own form of pressure. Her world shrinks to measurements: the length of the cell, the distance to the yard, the minutes allowed for movement. Choice disappears so completely that even small decisions feel unfamiliar. What to wear is decided for her. Where to stand is marked on the floor. When to speak is implied, not invited. Other inmates no longer confront her openly. Time has done their work. Her crime is known, cataloged, and settled into her identity. She becomes someone people maneuver around. Conversations lower when she approaches. Eyes track her movements without interest or sympathy. She is neither feared nor respected. She is something to avoid. Guards treat her with procedural distance. Not cruel, not kind. Requests are acknowledged slowly. Complaints vanish into systems designed to forget them. Any reminder of authority is subtle but constant. A pause before unlocking a door. A look held too long. Control is exercised quietly here. Her body adapts against her will. Muscles weaken from repetition. Skin loses color under artificial light. Illness lingers longer than it should. Medical care exists, but urgency does not. Pain becomes something to manage internally. Complaining changes nothing. The mind suffers differently. At first, memories attacked aggressively, forcing themselves forward. Over time, they shift. They arrive without emotion. Replayed so often, they lose sharpness. That dullness is more frightening than guilt ever was. It signals erosion. Jennifer begins to notice gaps. Faces she struggles to recall clearly. Details that once haunted her now feel distant, as if they belong to someone else. Prison does not encourage reflection that leads to growth. It encourages survival through detachment. Routine becomes sacred. Cleaning the same surface daily. Folding clothes the same way. Walking identical paths at identical times. These actions create the illusion of control. Without them, the days threaten to collapse inward. There are moments when the weight returns unexpectedly. A sound that resembles a past routine. A date overheard during count. A fleeting reminder of a life that once existed outside these walls. Those moments pass quickly, but they leave behind exhaustion. Jennifer understands now that the secrecy she once depended on has been replaced by exposure. Nothing here belongs solely to her. Thoughts are the only private space left, and even those feel monitored by memory. Hope does not disappear dramatically. It thins, it weakens, it stops announcing itself. The future becomes a concept without imagery. Plans are replaced by endurance. The idea of release exists only as a technical possibility, not an expectation. Prison teaches a lesson it never states directly. That freedom is not just movement, it is identity. It is the ability to imagine a self beyond the present moment. That ability erodes slowly, chipped away by repetition and consequence. Jennifer Gledhill lives now in a place where time punishes more effectively than walls, where silence is louder than confrontation, where the crime never needs to be mentioned because it is always understood. The affair that once felt like escape has long since disintegrated into irrelevance. The justifications that once fueled her decisions no longer hold shape. What remains is a quiet, permanent reckoning, because the true sentence was never just imprisonment. It was the irreversible understanding that the collapse of her family did not end when the crime was committed. It continues every day she wakes up, counts the walls, and realizes that the life she destroyed is the only thing that will ever keep her company.